Okay, so for this video, I'm doing a comparison between Panama and Puerto Rico, deciding which one I'd rather live in. The first thing I looked at was location of where both Panama and Puerto Rico were. Well, for me, it didn't really matter where they're located, so as a result, I put not applicable for this one. The next thing I looked at was the size of both Panama and Puerto Rico. As you can see, Panama is bigger, so I decided to pick Panama because Panama is bigger and I have more places to choose from if I want to live there. The next thing I looked at was population. And Puerto Rico has a greater population than Panama. So I picked Puerto Rico because since there are more people living in Puerto Rico, things become easier for me to become accustomed to living there and becoming well ingrained into society. Next thing that I looked at was the culture, specifically the languages. Well, in both Panama and Puerto Rico, the languages are the same. So I didn't really pick anything, so I just picked non-applicable. After this, I looked up the GDP for both Panama and Puerto Rico. You can see Puerto Rico has a bigger GDP than Panama, which means that the value of its goods and services are greater than those of Panama. And so as well, they picked Puerto Rico. After this, I looked at the per capita GDP. And as you can see here, it looks that Panama has a greater per capita GDP than Puerto Rico. Starting with Panama. But Puerto Rico has a greater GDP purchasing power parity. So once again, I decided to go with Puerto Rico. After this, I looked at the GNI, both Panama and Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico, once again, has a greater GNI, which means that its factors of production are being used efficiently to produce goods and services that are of good quality. And they're making a lot of these goods and services within a year. So once again, I had to pick Puerto Rico as well. But on the other hand, Panama has a greater GDP growth rate than Puerto Rico, as its growth rate is 8.4%, and Puerto Rico seems to be decreasing. So this may mean in the future that maybe Panama may have a better GDP than Puerto Rico and maybe doing better economically than Puerto Rico. But right now, it looks like Puerto Rico is doing better in more areas than Panama, as Puerto Rico scored better in GNI, GDP purchasing power parity, nominal GDP, and population. So Panama only scored better in size, per capita GDP, and GDP growth rate. The result of this, I decided to live in Puerto Rico, not in Panama.